project. As you know, we've had some major delays in the project schedule, so I'd like to go over some of those challenges that we've been working through and where we are now on the various issues. The Wilson Avenue Extension project consists of an improved two-lane, one in each direction roadway from East Avenue to Wardman Bullock Road, approximately 3/4 miles in length. The travel lanes will be 15 feet wide, along with 5-foot bike lanes in each direction. On the south side of the street, we will include a 6-foot wide pedestrian walkway. There will also be streetlights installed every 175 feet. These improvements are what we call minimum width improvements. Eventually, full width improvements will be conducted as development occurs along the adjacent properties. Full width improvements will include someday 2 lanes in each direction with an improved median and full sidewalks improvements on both sides of the roadway. The primary reason the city chose to only perform minimum width improvements at this time was to minimize environmental impacts and the associated required mitigation, and I'll talk a bit more about this shortly. The estimated cost for full width improvements would literally have been several $1 million more than we had budgeted for this project. So the goal was to get a road open in the most cost-effective manner possible, and hence the current design. It was also our goal to complete this project many months ago. However, we have had some difficulty in obtaining the necessary permits from the federal and state agencies involved, which is mostly due to the impact the project will have on the endangered species in the area. So let's talk a little bit more about these environmental challenges. The Wilson Avenue extension will result in permanent impacts to habitats and species identified as under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, previously known to most all of us as Department of Fish and Game. The most significant of these impacts is the impact to the federally listed as endangered San Bernardino kangaroo rat. So simplicity, so I don't have to keep saying that over and over again, we're just going to call him the K-rat. In 1998, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service listed the K-rat as endangered under the Federal Endangered Species Act. In 2002, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife designated 33,000 acres within the Inland Empire as critical habitat for the K-rat. Part of that area is shown here in purple, with the proposed roadway alignment shown in red, completely within the designated critical habitat. There is also impact to other habitats and species as well, but I'm going to focus here on the K-rat because that is our biggest challenges at this time. The proposed Wilson Avenue extension will impact 8.3 acres of this critical habitat. Now, I've had several inquiries regarding the residential development at the northeast corner of Wardman, Bullock, and Wilson, shown here. Tract 18741 was approved in January of 2013. I think many of you know is well under construction at this time. But I guess the question that's coming up is, why has a private developer been able to start on their project, but the city is struggling to break down on the extension? Well, as part of their development approval, the developer did have to follow SQL guidelines and garner environmental approvals, which included appropriate mitigation for the K-rat. However, they were not required to obtain the same federal and state permits for their work, and as such were not subject to the same scrutiny that the city is experiencing with Wilson Avenue. The city is required to obtain federal and state permits primarily due to the following factors. Number one, the road is crossing federal waters, and that requires us to get various permits issued by the Army Corps of Engineers, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Secondly, the road is segregating state conservation land and federal preserve land, shown in green here, that were committed to by the County Flood Control District as part of an unrelated project. These factors expose the city to a federal review process that is more involved than was experienced by the private development located to the east and required additional studies, hence the longer timeline. So where are we now in the environmental process? Currently, we are being required to perform additional K-rat trapping studies as well as other studies to fully characterize the size and nature of the environmental impacts. Once we obtain our results, we will be submitting a response back to the federal and state agencies. Based on their evaluation, we will be required to perform on-site and off-site mitigation measures as part of the Wilson Avenue extension to lessen the negative impact from the road widening on the environment within the project area. Examples of on-site mitigation would be For example, rolled curbs rather than the standard curbs to allow the KRAT to cross the pavement, and perhaps modifying the project lighting both during and after construction. Off-site mitigation will be in the form of securing land somewhere within the critical habitat that is identified as capable of supporting the KRAT and or currently occupied by the species. For the impact area, I mentioned 8.31 acres. We will have to obtain off-site mitigation at a minimum ratio of 3:1. So meaning a total of 25 acres would have to be acquired elsewhere for the mitigation of the KRAT alone. We have been working with the local resource conservation agency to identify potential off-site mitigation and have submitted a proposal to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for their review. The city has been working diligently with the various resource agencies as well as the County Flood Control District to develop an acceptable on-site and off-site mitigation plan which adequately addresses the negative impacts presented by the Wilson Avenue extension. Once this has been accomplished, we anticipate to obtain the necessary permits required to move forward with our project. Once we have received these permits, we can be out to construction in less than 3 months, with the construction period upon breaking ground be about 4 months. I also want to make a quick note on Wilson Avenue between Etiwanda and East. Right in here is this part of the extension is not part of our project. However, it will be completed by the private development on the north side, shown here as track 16072, that was approved in June 2004. Unfortunately, this development was on hold, but it is our understanding that the developer is now ready to move forward with this project. So now I'd like to hand it over to Jason Welday, the city traffic engineer, who will talk a little on how the Wilson Avenue extension will impact traffic flow throughout the surrounding community.
Thank you very much, Mark. We wanted to briefly talk about how we envision traffic flow, the pattern we are proposing and envision for traffic flow once Wilson Avenue extension is constructed. And we'll start first with traffic that comes from comes out of Summit Intermediate, right here. So as most people know, the entrance to the pickup and drop-off area for Summit Intermediate is right here on Banyan, just east of Etiwanda. The traffic flows through the parking lot here and then out. And what we are envisioning is that the majority of traffic will proceed north on East Avenue and east on Wilson out to Wardman Bullock and to areas to the east. The other school, Etiwanda Colony, has a kind of rotating in the opposite direction pattern, which, if you can see, it doesn't show up very well here. Basically, the pattern that we are envisioning is that the majority of the traffic going to Colony would head westbound on Wilson, south on East, and enter into the parking lots as they currently do. We've done some rough calculations on some of the land areas and the boundaries for Etiwanda Colony and Summit Intermediate, and we believe that once the Wilson Avenue extension is constructed, about 40 to 50% of the school traffic that now pretty much meets at the intersection of East and Banyan will be able to be diverted up to Wilson. Banyan and East will be able to be diverted up to Wilson, which should alleviate a good amount of the traffic on Banyan. And so with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back.
Thank you, Mr. Welday. We're both here. That concludes our presentation. We're here to answer any question. I also have our project biologist answer any specific questions about the endangered species.
Questions of staff?
The other developer that you were showing up there, Mark, that was going to do the extension from Etiwanda over,
yes,
has he already gone through all of the procedures for putting in the roadway?
Well, the development was approved, but then it was put on hold. So we have heard word that they want to move forward, but they have not actually formally done that application yet to move forward on it, no.
So they're still facing the same dilemma that we have for the last 3 years, 4 years?
We're anticipating that they will face some issues, but not the type of issues that we were facing. So in other words, I believe it'll be a little bit easier for them to actually do their extension than it was for ours.
Is that because they're not going to cross the federal waterways?
Correct. They're not crossing federal waters, and they're not segmenting the preserve and the conservation easement being set by the flood control district.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just one. Well, not a question, more of a comment. You know, you can't help but wonder when government in general, be it federal, state, county, districts, whatever, start forcing common sense solutions and not attorney's solutions, no offense, to everything that occurs that really stops progress. It's hurting not only the communities, but it's impacting the developing community. It's rising up the cost of just about everything under the sun we have. It seems time that cities need to start banding together, along with development communities and other people, to see, number one, I'm not against endangered species being protected. I think they can be a whole lot easier. But we're spending millions upon millions of dollars on studies that sometimes come back to be so rudimentary and easy to figure out. And I don't understand why we're doing it. Is there anybody that's actually attacking the whole basis for a lot of this time delay? Maybe, Mark, you can answer. I don't know.
I'm not aware of anybody trying to deliberately. It's just these are the
Eventually
requirements
when
that the agencies
say,
have.
hey, enough is enough. Oh, well, thank you.
Mr. Stoyer, have we already purchased the mitigation land that you spoke of, the 24 acres?
No, we haven't actually purchased it. The resource agency that we're working with does have a proposal and has submitted a draft of that proposal to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we're expecting to get comments back from them shortly. So no, we have not actually.
It's my understanding then, correct, that we do have to receive their approval to be able to qualify the mitigation land as being appropriate mitigation land for us to be able to move forward, correct?
That is correct.
And so we've submitted everything necessary on our side for some time now. And may I ask as a follow-up question, how many times have we had to go back and redo the study for the KRAT in that area?
We've performed 2 trappings to date. This is our 3rd.
This is our 3rd.
Yes.
Thank you.
You know, I guess it's time, if we have any leverage at the federal, state, I think we need to start exerting whatever political influence we can to expedite this process. I know the city manager and I, over a year and a half ago, sat with Sean Judson, the superintendent of the school district, and shared with them our plan. And the plan was to have the Wilson Ave extension done at the beginning of this school year, this last school year. And I would concur that it's very frustrating that a species can create such a delay to such a critical traffic circulation problem. And so I for one, would like, maybe also in addition to all the work we're trying to do to get things moving, whatever other influence we could exert either at the state or the federal level, and it sounds like it's more federal than it is state. And any ideas you have, ma'am, as a biologist, to try to expedite this, to get it through and explain the critical nature that we're facing in our community as a result of the development. You know, the streets on Banyan Avenue were never designed to be 4 lanes. It wasn't designed that way. We never had that in our master plan, so it is a 2-lane road. And it's very frustrating for all of us because we see the problem and we understand the busing issue. And I don't know whether or not we could do something with the school district and suggest that maybe their busing only includes the colonies in Etiwanda intermediate schools, and the other schools seem to be okay, but at least maybe there's something we could do to, maybe it wouldn't be a total implementation of busing throughout the district, but just a small portion until we get some of these traffic issues solved. I don't know, but I know that we're going to be working. I understand that we'll be working with the city or with the school district in partnership. We look at this as not a city problem and not a school district problem inherently, but a problem that we need to work and solve together. And that's also together with the residents and the students' parents at those schools. So is there anything that if you could maybe share with me at a later date, if anything, letters or anything that we could write, that the council could exert some influence on different agencies at the federal level, a trip to Washington DC or whatever it might take. I would like to know that.
We'll be in communication with you.
Thank you.
I have a question. On the mitigation land, we have identified a mitigation properties and we've submitted that? Is that what you're saying? It's
Yeah, we
been
have
submitted?
identified some potential mitigation properties,
Okay.
and we have submitted kind of an informal plan to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife for their comment and, informal approval at this time. So we're getting close.
We're getting close. How long is it gonna take them, or can we poke them a little bit and get some approval, or, because what if we get a big surprise and it's not approved? We go back to square one and lose a whole lot of time, or what do we do?
Well, I think to address that, again, I think there's a couple of things, as the mayor said, we can work with our elected officials. The public actually has provided quite a bit of commentary to the representatives for U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So I think they're aware of what some of the concerns in that are. And what we have endeavored to show them is that the property that is under contract, I guess, if you will, or potentially under contract for the conservation entity that we're working with, is what they would consider prime land. So it would be most likely to be accepted by them. And so I think that that's a good path to take at this point. If they turn us down, then yes, we will have to look at other measures. At this point, though, I think we'd like to try and give this, I mean, they've got a genuine proposal. We'd like to give it, we're really talking about a matter of a couple of weeks is what we're talking about. So we'd like to give it some time and see if it can get approved. They have an ability to give us tentative approval, if you will, pending completion of all of our studies in that, and that's what we're trying to work with them on having them take that course.
And concurrently then, we still need to be applying the pressure to our electeds.
Yes, well, I think the issue, the larger issue, which several of the council touched on here, and it is actually a priority, I know for the league and for others for next year, is the broader issue of SQL reform, and looking at, are there ways to expedite the environmental processes, and still perform them at some level, but not have them. This unfortunately is kind of one of those horror stories of things you hear that get hung up. So I think on that broader issue of SQL reform, that is something that would benefit the private development community, the business community, the public community. It really could be a win-win for everyone. And I think there is some momentum behind looking at that, and we have that. An earlier question was, is that part of the city's legislative platform? It is part of our legislative platform. We've advocated for that for a while, and we'll continue to support those efforts. And I know that the county has some equally strong feelings in that regard too. So San Bernardino County has been greatly impacted by the K-rat, as well as a little fly in other parts of the county, to a much greater degree than some of our neighboring counties. And so there is a lot of sensitivity in this area to addressing those issues.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for the report. We will now move back to what it was M1, and that is the 2013